It's my pleasure to now welcome Claudia Del Prizio, who is a partner at Bain Luxury Goods, to come and speak to you about some of the learnings that Bain has done around this sector. It's a very information-filled talk. If you don't get a chance to write down all of your notes, don't worry. We'll have a copy of the report for you after today's presentation.
Okay, so after the philosophical speech, I think that I have to take the position of talking about the dirty side of philanthropic initiatives, so money, and which can be the return of these initiatives. So this was the question Vanessa made me a few months ago, and actually it's very difficult to quantify goodness, and probably this is really two words that are really difficult to put one after the other, and the contrast is very interesting. Let's start from why all these sustainability and philanthropic initiatives have become so important recently. For sure, there are external and internal elements to that, 4 forces at least. One is the one that Brunello was saying before, global transparency. Everything that company does is totally transparent to consumers and to the people. So that's something that is happening now and was not completely. It was completely different even 10 years ago. And this is driving consumer awareness to the extent that everyone is talking about the global purpose and the broader purpose, and they are expecting good behaviors from companies. There is an increasing engagement of all stakeholders inside the companies, but also a real quest for creating innovative business models that are embedding in the business model broader purposes. So it's not just an approach that we were about to call just novice, but now companies are more in a proactive way of embracing sustainability inside their company. Where luxury stand in these, let's say, eras? Actually, we are in a phase of increasing engagement, not yet of a real, let's say, proactive approach across the industry. There are some leaders and best practices that are embracing sustainability as a way of doing business, like Brunello was saying. Other companies that are doing something more sporadically or starting to really understand how all these topics really link with their broader meaning of their brands. And from one side, we have what we call corporate social responsibility. It was what Brunello was talking about, is when doing good is part of your value proposition, is about the supply chain, is about human rights in how people work, is about all the aspects on how you do business. And this is really difficult to quantify. It's mainly points of gross margin, increasing cost of doing things, but it's really embedded in the systems. Then there is another bucket of initiatives that we call for now philanthropic initiatives, that are initiatives that are promoted by the brand that address social or environmental concerns beyond business operations, so like the ones we were discussing about Adidas. Let's talk of this second chunk of initiatives to see how the luxury industry is performing on these initiatives. We identified 3 baskets of possible initiatives that we called love for the planet, love for humanity, and love for the arts. And this is also where luxury brands and fashion brands are investing across the board with their initiatives. In the last 20 years, there have been always companies that invested money along these lines on philanthropic initiatives. And these initiatives were growing with the market up to the crisis, the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, when we have an acceleration of philanthropic initiatives. Actually, from 2007, 2008, philanthropic initiatives are now growing at a 15% CAGR and are really overperforming, let's say, the growth of the company's revenues. So the company are investing more and more in a disproportionate way vis-a-vis 10 years ago. Why? You may argue that this was a way to react to what we call luxury shame, so the fact that consumers were really questioning the value of luxury product in 2008 and 2009, and were really rethinking the ethical aspect of spending money in discretionary spending in products that are, I would say, not necessary and that are meant really to address desires and not needs. But we can say that this was a way to answer to this, really for the entrepreneurs to express their broader purpose that was already embedded in their operations and in the way we're doing things. They are just less shy in communicating to the consumer. They are just less shy in really embracing this into their own operations, into their brands, not only as a private matter, but as a company matter. In 2014, this initiative picked up to 750 million euro spent by the luxury brands. So we are here talking about only luxury brands. That's across all sorts of initiatives, from being more green into sponsoring arts and museums, the art foundations of LVMH and Prada, all sorts of initiatives. And this implies also on OPEX and CAPEX, so not only costs, but also investments that are giving back to the community, theaters, monuments, foundations, buildings, or whatever is improving the lives of citizens and consumers. It's a lot, is not a lot. Let's compare with other industries. First of all, before the crisis, this money was spent mainly into human initiatives and arts. During the crisis, this was more concentrated on really giving back to the communities, while currently we are back on trying to link all these initiatives with the arts and artistic elements, and this is around an enlargement, broader sense of creativity across the globe. So this is a creative industry, and it's really trying to give back to the broader creative industry in a broader sense. Is it enough? Is it a lot or not? This is 0.4% the revenues of luxury players. For best in class, it peaked to 0.7. This compares to other industries that are even double these figures, like healthcare, of technology and communication. And for sure, the absolute amount of money spent by this industry is still not comparable to what other industries are spending in philanthropic initiatives. That's why there are some organizations that are measuring the ethical conduct of different industries. Luxury doesn't score yet at the top, so still there is a gap to bridge in being ethical and being good across vis-a-vis other industries. Another point is that luxury brands are still very shy in communicating about their philanthropic initiatives. So many of them do a lot of things, but they don't communicate a lot around that. It's more the groups, so the Kering or the LVMH and Richemont, that they communicate more on philanthropic initiatives and sustainability more than single brands, because it's always very difficult to link these aspects to the broader meaning of the brand that is also often linked to fashion, beauty, and many intangibles that are so far from these sociological purposes. But as many of the speakers that were talking before said, there is a broader audience for these initiatives, and it's not just consumers, and we will see how consumers are interested or not in these initiatives and how they are paying back. But it's employees and how they are engaged and loyal to the brands. It's investors, and it's press and all the other influencers, including NGOs and governments and institutions. So the reason for doing these things is relies in many of these aspects and can even not be super correlated to the response of consumers, even if the response of consumers is positive and increasingly important for them. First of all, employee engagement. I think the guys from Adidas were very clear on that. 83% of employees really cares about sustainability and philanthropic initiatives, about their company is engaged in a broader purpose, and they expect their company to be good. And that's a clear driver of loyalty. It's a clear driver of engagement. It's a clear driver of happiness in working for these companies. And there is a strong correlation between companies where people love to work and their results in terms of revenues and profitability. So the famous best place to work are usually companies that overperform the market by 2.5%, up to 4% when they are super best in class. So these are tangible measures on how employee engagement really results in better performance for the company. Second aspect is the financial investors. It is true that they like at least the transparency, so what you declare and what you do has to be aligned, and this was what Brunello was discussing before, but it's also true that every company is going into crisis in a way or in another, so there are moments where the markets are down, there are moments where you're not fulfilling the promises in terms of business for many different reasons, and ethical companies are usually treated better by investors. So they usually 8 times a faster recovery of share prices after crisis because they are considered more reliable and more trusty. And that's really a tangible measure of profitability and success and long-lasting success. Another aspect that we can measure is the return on free advertising. We try to measure, out of the 750 million spent in 2014 in philanthropic initiatives by the luxury brands, we measure that more than 1 billion was the return in free media coverage. On average, 1.5 average return in free media coverage. And in some cases, when these initiatives are really executed in a perfect way, and we will see what we mean for this, we reach even 3 times the return in free media. And again, this is not free media on the product, on the brand. This is not the typical editorial. These are editorials that are talking about the company in a broader way, that are really more relevant to consumers, because you're not talking about just the product, but you're talking on causes that matter to the final customers. You're talking about the present. You're talking about the future. So you're not just talking about quality, heritage, and the usual things that every brand is talking about, but it's really talking about creating a better place where everyone can live and can grow. Nevertheless, we are talking of now only 3 to 5% of all the, let's say, articles on the fashion systems are really related to this initiative. So they have a really big return in terms of media, and also the quality of the media that usually return this information is much higher in terms of, let's say, quality of the readers and of the public. Another aspect is consumers. we did a survey for this study that we did for this conference. We interviewed 2,050 consumers across the globe, Europe, US, China, Japan, Korea. And 94% of the consumers are declaring that luxury brands should be engaged in philanthropic initiatives. And 60% are declaring that luxury brands should be more engaged than other industries. So they expect excellence across the value chain. They expect industries that are at the top of their value chain, of their sectors, to be even at the top of these initiatives and to give back, since they are profitable, since they are excellent, since they are rooted in the territories and in the communities, to give back more than the average. And this is more important for the younger generation. I don't think this is, I think, nothing astonishing here. And the causes that matters the most for them are the ones linked to the nature and the sustainability and the ecological sustainability. Having said that, the reality is that only 9% of consumers are declaring that they will shift brands because of ethical conduct. So they will not choose the Gucci bag because they are doing a philanthropic initiative, but because they like Alessandro Michele's style. At the same time, they really care, and these figures are really increasing year after year dramatically. So 9%, they are already ready to shift. 14% could consider changing shopping behavior. What is true that all these philanthropic initiatives are more relevant to them when they are more near to their territory, where they are really more really authentic to the brand, and when they feel engaged. So probably doing things without really engaging the customers in these initiatives is not enough. Excellent execution is really being authentic, being real, picking the right fights, and also involving the customers in these initiatives. And these are the returns in terms of social media repost of initiatives that were really well executed and that were rooted into the community. The ultimate measure, and is what Adidas was saying before, for us is advocacy of the consumer, so Net Promoter Score. From our research, consumers are 50% more willing to advocate a brand if they feel that the brand is also not only beautiful, not only sexy, not only perfect and high quality, but also able to show a broader meaning and a broader purpose. And this measure is a measure of profitable growth. This means that people will talk about your brand without being paid for doing this in a very consistent way and in a very, I would say, emotional way. And so they are convincing other people to buy products because it's correct to buy this product. So for us, this is the ultimate metrics. And it's, again, linking also to the conversation of this morning about branding, logo, and what the brands stand for, and how really to become relevant in the mind of the consumers. We have to consider that consumers don't think to fashion products all the day. So even if they are fashion victims or very, very educated, they think to their own things. They think to their children, to their cat, to their work, and they dedicate a small portion of their lives to you. So broadening this portion of salience is very important. So there are many things that are more relevant than fashion in their lives. And it's their future, their present, is the causes that matters, their passion, their interest. And this is one way to be more relevant in their lives besides what you do on the product. So it's not substituting, but it's adding value to their conversation and becoming relevant for their conversation. So just to conclude, we think these initiatives overall are money that are spent in a good way. Still, this industry can do more in terms of money spent, but in particular can do more on how they communicate and how they do these things. First thing, and probably my last, I would say, sentence on this topic is pick your fight, be authentic. You cannot do anything. You have just to find which is the cause that matters to your brand, to your organization, to you, and really be credible on that cause and really push this cause to the full potential. You cannot just really serve surf this eco-tourism, like someone was saying before, and do different things, but pick your fight and be very clear that is relevant to you, that means something to you and for your organization. And don't be shy. So if this is authentic, no need to be shy. So it's important that you communicate. This is not the main brand purpose, but it's a collateral element of the brand that can help become more relevant in people's conversation and in people's lives. Thank you. I'm going down.
Please do. I think we have time for one audience question, and before we jump in, let me go ahead and ask. You know, a couple of years ago, I did a series about working conditions in Chinese factories that make iPhones and iPods, and one of the things that was unique that I saw was that when it comes to things like denim and clothing, when there are abuses that are revealed, we see a huge switch in consuming behaviors. So certainly certain textiles are very exposed. When it comes to iPhones, particularly a number of years ago before there were replacements, despite what was happening in factories, there was very little switching behavior. What industries are most at risk for consumer switching if there is expose that reveals working conditions or ethical issues that undermine that brand?
I think fashion is less exposed because, again, if something is an object of desire, you are irrational about it. So it is clear that you care, but probably not so much and not in a rational way. And it's probably you will keep buying even if you think that is not probably the right thing to do. And this was probably the behavior of the baby boomers and of the next generation, but it's not the way how millennials are behaving, and for sure is not the way how the next generation, the native digital, are behaving. So I think that the risk of shifting is very high across the board. And again, they are not shifting if you're doing good things, but they are shifting if they're doing bad things. That is probably worst.
I think we have time for one question, if there's a question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned the 5 golden rules. Would you have some examples of brands or organizations that you feel are doing a good job of implementing those rules?
Yes. I don't want to mention Brunello because I think that he's excellent because it's so authentic in what he does and he believes so strongly that it's so clear. But if you take Fendi, for instance, what they are doing in Rome is part of their brand positioning, of their brand meaning and purpose. And so they are giving back to the city and they are animating whatever they do from Fontana di Trevi restructuring or the new building where they move their quarter. They are giving back to the Roman community. They are activating this on the social network. They are making it relevant for their strategy. So is everything so consistent that I think is so well done that actually the return on consumers and press and all stakeholders were very, very high. I think the same for Fondazione Prada, for instance, was so clear that this was an interest, a genuine interest of the founder, and that creativity for Miuccia was something that goes beyond the product, and this is a way of experimenting new things, that this was so consistent, the results were amazing. So that's...
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.